Good afternoon, everyone. This afternoon, it's my pleasure to introduce Letha Wilson, an artist whose work I've admired for quite some time. Several years ago, and this idea of image objects started to circulate around in art discourse. An artist named Artie Virkant wrote an essay called Image Object Internet, but I thought it was such a great term because so many of us make objects that bear or convey or contain images, and conversely make images that aren't just flat images on the wall, but that are somehow also in one way or another objects, sometimes even sculptures. I think, if I ask for a show of hands, and I won't, many of you would raise your hands if what you make is in fact not simply paintings, drawings, photographs, prints, but image objects of one kind or another. I think this describes Letha Wilson's practice pretty well, as you'll see shortly. And I think that Letha combines photography and sculpture in ways that are particularly interesting, that to me feel spontaneous and intuitive, and at the same time never arbitrary. They feel motivated, if not always obvious, the image shape relationships or image object relationships. Let me summarize her accomplishments. Lots of solo exhibitions, including recently at the Center for Maine Contemporary Art in Rockland, Maine. Multiple exhibitions with Grimm, a gallery that opened up a space in Tribeca a couple of years ago, but has had spaces in London and is it Amsterdam for a long time. Interesting gallery with a great program. And so at Grimm, Higher Pictures Generation, where I last saw Letha's work in 2022 in Brooklyn. The Bevier Gallery at RIT, the Rochester Institute of Technology, Anderson Ranch Art Center in Aspen, Colorado. The Center for Contemporary Art and Culture at the Pacific Northwest College of Art in Portland. The DeCordova Sculpture Park and Museum in Lincoln, Massachusetts. Lightwork in Syracuse. Lots of overlaps with our last speaker, actually, interestingly enough, in terms of where you've shown. Art in General, which was until a few years ago a really important not-for-profit art space that basically, folded during the pandemic. Vox Populi, a great nonprofit in Philadelphia that's run by a collective of artists, really sort of community-based space with strong programming. And then group exhibitions at the Nasher Museum at Duke in North Carolina, Sperone Westwater here in New York City, Tiger Strikes Asteroid in Brooklyn, the Biennial of the Arts in Nice, France, Mark Strauss Gallery here in New York, a show that Rico Gatson curated at Miles McHenry a few years back. Marianne Boesky here in New York, Martos Gallery and The Hole, also in New York. Anat Ebgi in Los Angeles. She recently opened a space in Tribeca. Jack Hanley Gallery in New York, the University Art Gallery at UC San Diego, my alma mater, and the Center for the Arts at Wesleyan University. She's also received support, grants and awards from the New York Foundation for the Arts. She received the Niska Naifa Artist Fellowship in Photography twice in the last decade. Support from the Jerome Foundation and the Santo Foundation, and also participated in the Artist in the Marketplace program known as AIM at the Bronx Museum of the Arts, which is an interesting thing for you guys to consider for the future. Done a bunch of residencies, including at McDowell, most recently, also at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, at Lightwork in Syracuse, the Montello Foundation, in Nevada, I believe. She had a studio through the Marie Walsh Sharp Wallentis studio program in Dumbo. She did a Headlands residency at the Headland Center for the Arts in Sausalito, just north of San Francisco. Did a residency at Yaddo, another one at Bemis in Omaha, and also the Santa Fe Art Institute Fellowship residency in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So yeah, in her education, she received a BFA from Syracuse and an MFA from Hunter College in New York City. So she was, I think, classmates with William Powhida twice, and also attended the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture. Please join me in giving a warm and rousing welcome to Aletha Wilson.
Hi, thank you for having me. Really, it's great to be here. I've known so many graduates from your program over the years, and teachers too. So yes, my name is Aletha Wilson. I grew up in Colorado, and I was born in Hawaii, but we moved to Colorado when I was 4. So when I was young, my dad was very much into nature and the outdoors and fishing and hiking. We never went skiing. It was always like slow nature. And starting when I was about 6th grade, the 4 of us would go on like a week-long backpack trip in the mountains. So getting really remote. So for 5 or 6 years, we did that. And there'd be cameras passed around, and my dad would choose like the best one to kind of blow up in frame. So this was, I guess, a photograph my dad took, and they'd be kind of passing around cameras. That's me on the left and my mom. So I really didn't kind of think anything of it, but it was always like our family photographs were these really landscapes. There's actually hardly ever people in them. So I went to Syracuse from Colorado. And as an undergraduate, I was a painting major, but I was kind of immediately interested in work that blurred the lines between mediums. Like, could something be a sculpture and a painting and a drawing? And I sort of took as many electives as I could, and printmaking and photography. And I was really interested in cross-disciplinary work. And then I moved to New York City, right out of Syracuse. And then for the first year, I had various part-time jobs, but I was also an intern at Artist Space, which is another nonprofit space that does still exist, but I learned quite a bit from that. So then I went to Hunter and continued to work at Artist Space 1 day a week. But I do think, like, working for that organization, I learned quite a bit about the way the art world works, or how many artists there are, what it means to look through submissions. So at Hunter, I was first, I worked for this artist named Jason Middlebrook, and he used to build walls at the New Museum. So he taught me how to build walls, and I would go with him on the crew. So I think in grad school, I feel like I am always drawn to sculpture, installation, works that kind of envelop your body. I felt like it was very open to what the material could be, but I also was always kind of taking photographs of the spaces I built, and always going back to these photos from Colorado. So I would kind of make these giant, this is just built in my studio in grad school. And then these are kind of photos from Colorado where I whited out one element. So whether in this case, it's the man-made feature of the image. And finally, like my last year of grad school, I just had this idea of kind of merging the two very literally. And I did my first photo sculptures. I call these extrusions because it really was sort of using the photograph as the outline of the figure, and then it was kind of extruded out into space. But a very weird sort of, it was like an idea that I couldn't really visualize until I made these pieces. And it, to me, was really exciting to kind of even screw a hole through a photograph. Was like an exciting moment, because I felt then that, why was photography listed separately? Like in the gallery, I don't even know if it's now, but in the Village Voice, like photo was separate than galleries. So there was this divide between photography and the rest of the art world, which I always thought was strange. So that's where I kind of first had this idea of kind of breaking breaking out some of these rules and could a landscape photograph be contemporary? So these are really the two pieces from my thesis show. This was a photograph of the Vegas hotel on the Vegas Strip. And the piece is larger than me, comes out of the wall. And also I made a video. So I did a series of videos. So called Possibilities for a Car Drive. And again, it was another way of kind of navigating the landscape with a system where every few minutes the car would turn and then it would divide and divide into different views, all starting at the same point. And this is, so actually so when I graduated Hunter, which was over 20 years ago, just gonna say that, I was actually showing my videos more than kind of anything else. I started working at Artist Space full time because I needed health insurance. And it was, yeah, I learned quite a bit from that experience of being in charge of admissions, hanging all the artwork on the walls, seeing all the ins and outs of it. So I didn't have as much time for the studio. And then I was invited to do my first outdoor sculpture and taking all that wall building experience, flipping the gallery wall kind of inside out. So this is a lean-to I built, all using discarded materials from Artist Space when they were like tearing down walls for a show. This is the old front desk. So I just kind of loaded up U-Haul. And again, I think one other reoccurring idea for me is how should a material behave and what happens when it misbehaves, and kind of assumptions we make about how something should be in the world. So drywall is not supposed to be outside. And then this, I was really interested in how it would weather. So this is after maybe 6 months outside, and the water kind of made these like river patterns. So from that piece, I applied for this show at Socrates Sculpture Park. It was an open call. And the show is called Waste Not, Want Not. And again, these are all drywall walls from actually Matthew Mark's gallery. It was torn down from a Jasper Johns show. And all the wood was from a weekend-long art fair that were just throwing it all out. So all of this material is discarded, reused, and then I worked on the park to build it. And so that was a cool piece for me. And I was still making these extrusions occasionally. This is my last extrusion. This one, I didn't cover it up. So you can kind of see, it's a single photograph and it's going from my dad into a Joshua tree on the right. And kind of installed in the corner of the gallery. So around this time, I'm gonna take my sweater off. It's this ring light. So around this time, first of all, I quit the job at Artist Space because I really just needed time in my studio. Actually, Mark mentioned the Artist in the Marketplace program, which is something I did a year or two out of grad school. That was really amazing, kind of practical program. You're with other artists, you do studio visits, and then you have a show together. So I think that was a good lifeline for me coming out of grad school. And then I kept getting rejected from artist residencies that I was applying to. So my mom gave me an artist residency from my parents at their house in Colorado. And you can look at, she sent me an acceptance letter. It's on my Instagram page, but it's like marbled paper and stuff. So yeah, so I basically the urge was to get out of the city, have some time to work on my work, kind of clear my head. And the point is you can just make that happen for yourself. It doesn't have to be something you're waiting for someone to approve. So that was important for me to get out and just kind of sit around and think and read and write and do kind of bad drawings. That when I came back to the city, I felt kind of reinvigorated. And I decided that, the problem with the extrusions were they're time consuming, they were expensive, kind of needed a reason to make them. And also I didn't like working with styrofoam. So I decided to go back to the darkroom because I was already shooting film. And I thought that actually printing the photos myself would make them less precious, which is sort of a reversal. But I went to the darkroom and then also started working with materials that I felt had some sort of relationship with nature. Or also this dual relationship between like a 2x4 that was a tree, or the source of the drywall was gypsum rock. So thinking about kind of this merging of natural materials and architectural materials. So this is one I made right after. And the relationship between the image and the form is more poetic. It's a little more off the cuff. I was trying to be more kind of free in my studio. So this was something I wrote around then. This is probably around 2006. Ways to say fuck you to a photograph while still adoring it secretly. Arrows, bullets, bombs, fire, piss. So this kind of sums up my frustration at the image of these landscape photographs. Also, I'm taking all these photographs myself, and just the beauty of the landscape and your frustration for not being there, and that the flat image doesn't represent the time there. So I was really kind of thinking about this, how to sort of destroy it while still preserving it. So these are done, some of the early pieces I made kind of right after that time using wood. I actually had a whole bunch of negatives. That was what I was shooting. So just going back to the darkroom and going back through my negatives and printing. And like in that, list of actions, say if you took an arrow and shot it through the center of a piece of paper, how would that paper fold towards you? And then it took me a while to figure out how to make this out of wood. And then I chose this photograph looking up into the trees. So that was kind of chronological, and now I'm going to shift to kind of different approaches I use to kind of deconstruct the photograph, or thinking about it as an object. So I got into Skowhegan in 2009. It's a residency in Maine that's very much in nature. I had applied for 10 years before I got in. So just saying, you got to sometimes keep trying. I think I was actually an alternate. I don't think I actually got it. But I finally got into Skowhegan several years out of grad school, which in hindsight, I think was very good for me to have that time away from school and kind of be craving in your community. There's 65 artists, you're all together for 9 weeks, so you really bond with people. And for me, it was the first time I was kind of in a landscape and working outside every day that I could, because I always thought that the landscape had to be in contrast to sort of city. But as I was walking through the trails, I realized I could take a photograph of the rocks, and that could be a piece, or the vista, because I think before I was going out and looking, had an idea of what I wanted to find when I was shooting, and I realized that I can't. It's better to just be there, take the photographs, appreciate it, because it relieves pressure, like not having expectations on what the photographs will look like. So sorry, that was a little bit of a ramble, but so this is one of those sort of close-up photographs, thinking about the surface of an image. It's a spray paint. This is dipped in cement, white Portland cement. And these are all photographs I print in the darkroom, and a lot. My own color lab, which still exists, and I still print there. Putting the photograph face down into cement for 24 or 48 hours. And then thinking about the frame of the image, and what if, why is it stuck in this frame? So this is called Granite Tumbler, where the photograph is really kind of oozing out of the frame. Vertical Horizon, where it's a horizontal image kind of squished into a vertical frame. And this one's like little, like that. Again, thinking of the frame, cutting holes in the frame. This is cement poured into the frame from above and leaking out. And this piece was kind of important for me. So this was also done on a residency. I think that the thing that's so great about artist residencies is you have time to kind of understand your best way of working. You're sort of cleared of all your responsibilities, basically. So it's sort of this empty, open canvas for you to understand yourself as an artist better. I think that's the most helpful thing. And this, I had been gifted a medium format camera And this was one of the early photos I took with it in Colorado. And it's just such a pretty photograph. And I was like carrying it around from, travel here, travel there. And I just didn't know what to do with it. So then I just had this idea of like punching in the face. So there's a single piece of wood a plywood that's one cut and it's being sandwiched between it. So how is a photograph held to the wall? In this case, it's being sort of pinned by the wood. Again, this is also kind of pinned. There's a hole in the drywall. This piece is called 2x4, and then the wood is pushed through the photograph into the wall. So again, it's pinning it. And also a lot of these works, like because I built walls and galleries, I understood how they worked and how to break into them really. This is sort of a larger version of that idea. It's a 12-foot 2x4 pushing in this maybe 4x5-foot photograph. This is at a museum. And yeah, I just love the idea that the photograph is only being held up by the pressure of that wood pinning it into the drywall, and then the top corner is just tucked in there. And again, fast forward. This was a show I did in Philly at an artist run space, and they just happen to have glass there. So similar idea of using the two pieces of glass to pin the photo, and there's aluminum pipe underneath that's being held up. This piece, which a lot of times I have an idea and I kind of do a very small test. This was one I kind of conceived of while I was in a residency at Lightwork. Lightwork is photography based, I guess, artist, but it was back at Syracuse where I went to school. But I was able to finagle that they would give me a show in the space like right after, kind of during my residency. So I was really working in the gallery and able to work into it. So this piece, there's slots that I cut into the drywall, and then the two sides of the photograph are like pushed into the wall. So it's called Slotted Sunset. And I've since done much larger ones, 6 feet tall. And this again, how is a photograph held to the wall? This is for the show. This was a show at American University in Washington, D.C. So they had this round gallery, and they're like, okay, you do something in here for like $500. And I was like, why would any architect? I had a challenge to figure out how to work with this rounded space. So two things. First, to kind of punctuate it a little bit FU to the architect, but also this is also a nod to Richard Serra's prop piece, and then Charles Ray's version of it, which is a photograph prop. So it's also kind of a nod to prop, again, thinking of this 2x4 pinning the photograph to the wall and also pushing it into the wall. So a lot of times like pieces like this is sort of a performative moment when I have to go to the space and really make it happen, and I really only get one shot. And this is a photograph from Headland's residency. So another, for me, the beauty of going to these artist residencies and locations is I get to travel and shoot and take photographs, and it all kind of works back in. And again, how's a photograph held up? So Mark was kind of talking about, so the weird thing that happened was I consider all my peers to be painters, sculptors. I actually don't really know I didn't really know the photography world. I was nervous about going to the darkroom because I was kind of breaking rules. There's this moment in like 2011 or something where suddenly blogging and the internet like found my work. And I think at a moment when photography was really questioning itself. And so the gallery I ended up having my first solo show in New York was Higher Pictures, which is specifically a photography gallery. And yeah, it was just very interesting because suddenly it was like they noticed. And I think the other thing, just to kind of mention a practical thing about galleries, is like, I think in the beginning when you get out of school, you want a gallery to sort of reaffirm you're a good artist, or to kind of give you that level accomplishment, but I do think the more I was working and showing nonprofits, I realized that they actually need me. Like the galleries need you as artists. You as the artists are producing all their content. So I think to kind of change it around instead of giving them all the power. And so many shows and opportunities I had were from fellow artists, were from people I met at Artist Space. The community is really, I think, so important on a side note. So this is my first solo show in New York, my first solo show at Higher Pictures. And that's a single photograph and a concrete column that I had poured around this photograph. Again, a larger version of a small version I made. And also, there was a moment where I kind of was like, well, do I have to take my own photograph? So this is a photograph from the Grand Tetons. And I'd seen a documentary and I was like, so beautiful. What if I just download photographs? This is like 2010. And then I was like, you know what, I have to go there. So it was just a decision I made that it's important to me that I go to these places. I go to these hikes, I'm shooting, I'm there because I think my experience in the spaces comes back to the studio one way or another. So it is this sort of long process between shooting and then printing, and then maybe eventually it becomes a piece of art. Is it close up? And again, how's the photograph held into the wall? This is the first shot I had at Grimm in New York. That is a steel I-beam. There's a hole in the wall and it's holding up this 8-foot by 10-foot photograph. And then what about the back of a photograph? So thinking about the front and the back of a photograph, this is sort of an early piece I would consider a drawing. There's a piece of paper on the back painted red, and then these little triangles. It's almost like an advent calendar. So you're seeing the back, the front, and the wall all at the same time, which I always like that idea of kind of seeing both sides at once. So often that kind of hold through, again, looking through the image or going through the image and what's behind the photograph. This was a series I did for the Armory show, and their bronze tubes kind of had specially made. So the hole goes all the way, it goes all the way through the piece. So you could touch the wall through that. And I've done a few artist books. I just finished my 4th one. And that was really, so another little anecdote. So when I worked at Artist Space and I was building walls, and after grad school, I was doing a lot of freelance wall building. And I did a lot of wall building art in general. And got to know the people there. And sorry, side note. So at the same time, I'm like applying for things, always trying to get into opportunities. And I had applied for a residency at the Lower East Side Print Shop and had been rejected. But the curator, or one of the people working there said, you know, I really like your work. Sorry, you didn't get this. She came over, had a studio visit with me. Her name's Courtney Finn. A few years later, she gets a job at Art in General. A few years later, she's a senior curator, and then she invites me to do a solo show there. So you just never really know who's going to see your work when you're applying for things. And I know that it can feel, you know, it's hard to be rejected like that, but I do think that it's important to kind of get your images out there. So the first show that I had at right after I had the show at Higher Pictures, I had the opportunity to do this show at Art in General, which is like a massive space. And I had like a full month to kind of work. So the artist book was like one part of that. And I made 500 of these, but there's each like hand torn hole punches. And the nice thing about a book is you can see the front and the back. So I really like that. I think that's something I like working with photography, to think about scale, that it could be small and intimate, or it could be large, and the difference in how those sizes kind of relate to our body. Or even like touching a photograph. So what's behind a photograph? This is from the Art in General show. And this was kind of a hidden window that was behind this drywall. So I cut holes out of the drywall and then mounted the piece on it. So the light will come in from outside. And the first version of this piece I did at Vox Populi, and Mark mentioned Vox Populi. That was also something where they just had open calls for submissions. So That was one of my earliest solo shows, was sort of just applying for that. So that's the other thing about the, nonprofit or artist-run spaces. You can maybe have a little more room to experiment, cut holes in their walls and do things like that. So what's behind the wall, and what it really kind of looks like the Big Dipper, which was not my plan, but at certain times of the day, the light will come through. The thing I like about this piece is even when you stand next to it, you can kind of feel the breeze coming from outside. So that sort of contrast between the outdoors and the image of the outdoors. Interested in. That's this place called The Wave, this photograph. And so many of these hikes I did with my mom and dad, into my 30s. So it's often like a family trip. Again, what's behind a photograph. And again, what's behind a photograph, similar idea where there's two huge windows. This is a project I did at the PNCA in Portland, and installed this almost wallpaper-like photograph I'd taken, and then cut these slots out of the wall and the image so that light would kind of come through at different times of the day. What about the surface of an image? How folding it or bending it changes it. This is sort of another early piece where it's just a photograph folded into a paper airplane and then unfolded. So kind of like a quick drawing for me. And I then kind of scaled it up, and it becomes a little more comedic. Hug, thinking of the body and how it kind of holds itself, and maybe that's what sometimes I'm thinking about in terms of the form. And this is cement I slathered onto this. And a double-sided photograph kind of slotted into itself. So again, the image turning front and the back. And just the sort of repeated, I return to this kind of accordion fold often because it just gives me a lot of room to move the image. And I don't know, in this case, it's really specifically making the shape from, there's two photographs from Colorado that I printed. Oops, sorry. Oh my gosh. Should be able to, thanks. So again, like the how, if the image isn't flat, what is the surface doing? Is it folding? Is it bending? How does that change your experience of that image? In this piece, just the simple idea of taking a horizon line. Again, this is worked up from a smaller version, but it's a photograph from the Salt Flats, and it's basically made into a plywood box. The photograph is face down. There's a piece of wood here, and then I fill the whole back with concrete. So it's like the sinking horizon line. And it's very heavy. It's probably like 250 pounds. So that was another piece I did for Art in General. I poured a lot of these pieces in the gallery. That was pretty cool. They let me really have free range with that. And then going forward, so now I'm able to, a kind of a new technology I've started using over the past 5 or 6 years is UV printing or flatbed printing. You can basically take any material to a company like Lamont, and the image is sprayed down, and then use UV light to cure it. So it really opened up like materials I could have the image printed on and then manipulate afterwards. So this is printed on zinc. And this is also called Hug. This is printed on kind of a vinyl rubber. And again, the image kind of moving, in this case, really hugging the corner of the gallery. And then this is just a piece of steel nestled in there. And another photograph from Headlands there. Yeah, and this sort of, I mean, I think in my work, it's not so didactic that it's nature good, human bad. It's like, it's complicated. And I think that the works come into balance in some way, and it sort of creates this relationship that I'm interested in. And face down, this idea of this kind of beautiful photograph you can't really even see because it's face down in the space. And this was mounted onto steel. So this is one of my earlier like steel pieces, although this is from 2013. So how strong is a photograph? Can it hold concrete? This is a very small baby, but like there's a, the sense of the material of the photograph holding the concrete together. Can it hold up a steel bar? A single print with this sort of bubble coming out of the frame and this found piece of steel resting at the waterline. This is also from the Grand Tetons. Can it hold up 2 steel pipes? And this was a piece I showed in Paris and actually it's in a few sections, but this was kind of an early piece printing on steel, the UV printer. The image is printed and then folded afterwards. But to think of this pipe being kind of nestled by this land form, yeah, that was also kind of a risk because I prepared the idea, but didn't really know until I got to the gallery whether it would sort of not crush everything. And so concrete as a material, I started working with it around 2010. I think I'd seen this artist work and they had used concrete in this very like elegant, organic way. And I was just like, oh, I never thought about it. Again, assumptions you make about how materials should behave. So I got interested in it and I really just learned by like buying a bag of concrete and testing things out. So this is an early piece called Concrete Snowbank. In this case, I actually drill a hole through the image and like pour the concrete into a form, which is kind of wonky. But the early pieces, the concrete is sort of a distinct element in the work. And then, so one of the residencies I went on was the Bemis Center for Contemporary Arts that's in Omaha. And that's 3 months. And you basically have this huge room that you live in as your studio. So you really don't have to like leave your room studio. So at that point, I was really deep diving into concrete, covered all my floors with plastic and paper. And I've been pouring concrete into frames and then the glass broke. And I really liked to be able to see the concrete without glass. So I started this series where I'd make box mold, lay the photograph in, pour the concrete right on top and flip it over. So this was a series I did of these where they're poured into the frame. This is a photo from the Badlands, but I was really surprised with how well these materials kind of work together physically. And I think also for me, it was different because there was I had a lack of control over what would happen. So that did feel kind of scary, but it was also really interesting to me, what would happen. So, and I did a series for the show at BAM. And then this piece, a little piece of concrete fell off and the image had transferred onto the surface. So that gave me an idea for seeing how that could work. So this is the first piece where there's a photograph inside, there's a photograph on the plywood, and it's almost like printmaking. So there's a transfer and a photograph, and it gets a little crazy. One thing is I did not take very good notes when I made this piece. I really like this piece, but I could not figure out what kind of cement or concrete I had bought and used, and I was really like annoyed at myself. So I had to spend about 6 months. I spent an entire residency at Yaddo, like really being a mad scientist. And is it Secrete? Is it Quikrete? Is it cement? And what kind of aggregate and what kind of paper works with it? So now I take very good notes every time I do this, anything really, because you don't want to have this amazing discovery and then just like not be able to replicate it. So I do advise you to take notes. So this was also for my first, I just kind of figured all that out right around the time my first show at Higher Pictures. So I did show a few of these. This is from that show. Again, there's a hole that goes through to the wall. Oh, sorry, why do I keep doing that? Wait, show me. Oh, okay.
Just gonna tap here.
Make it look easy. Thank
Practice.
you. So yeah, so pouring the concrete with the color photographs. And then these pieces are pure concrete. So the photograph is folded and face up, and then the concrete is poured onto the face and then removed. So there is no photograph now, it's just the image that's been transferred. And then again, these were very, you know, just something I kind of figured out. And also something about the work is like, all this is analog. Like I'm not in front of a computer, it's all darkroom. It's like my body goes to this place, it shoots film, it goes to the darkroom, I'm printing, I'm in my studio pouring. And there's something about the physicality of my relationship with the work that's that is important to me. And when I started printing the darkroom, everyone's like, what are you doing? Everyone's going digital. Like they would barely even sell me photo paper. But I was like, nope, this is what I'm doing. Because it's just a different experience than printing digitally. And also happy accidents. So similarly to what I was saying about when I shoot, that I go out there and I kind of let things happen. Very similar to the darkroom, because I don't care if it's necessarily has some scratches or dust in it, if it's a little too blue or a little too yellow. So when I go to the darkroom, I'm just like trying to create as many prints as I can. So it relieves the pressure of, I think, traditional printing where they're really, really detailed and trying to get exactly the perfect color. So it's much more free for me. In 2014, I got a travel grant from the Drum Foundation to go to Hawaii. I hadn't been there since I was 4, and I spent a month there shooting, about a week on each island. So that was so amazing. I still return to those images quite a bit, actually. And these are some of the largest concrete sea print pieces that hang on the wall. This weighs about 400 pounds. So this is from my second show at Higher Pictures, where I just kind of got really large with these. The other thing about the photographs is I often use these rocks to hold the paper down and sticks, so they come out in the prints as photogram elements. And then I made about 3 large ones. This all photos from Hawaii. They're really heavy. So this is a view from that show, that second show at Higher Pictures. They had a very small gallery. And, you know, I've continued, I just poured some concrete last week. I continue working in this vein. I always just was interested in kind of happy accidents or different ways the material would behave. In these, I had steel frames made for them that were also had a face element, so as part of it, trying to kind of get out of the rectangle by cutting the form. One of my roommates was like worked at a metal shop, so I would go there all the time and just like, I don't know, I'm still really interested in metal and what it can do, and the various, you know, patinas and qualities of steel. And so now I can UV print. So this is a UV print on top of concrete and a photograph and color in there. And it also prints over the frame too. Here's another one from that. So there's things I can control and things I can't control, and kind of being in that space of unsure is exciting. I think, you know, another advice or something is like, it should be fun what you're doing. Doesn't mean it's easy, but like that joy of kind of discovery, for me, that's really interesting and keeps me there. So I just try to have fun. Is important. And then in COVID, when I couldn't go to the printer, I was kind of going back to this idea of adding color to the concrete. This is a photograph from Death Valley with different powder pigments in the concrete. And this was from Rico's show, Light. Rico has a studio next to me in Bushwick, and he's been my good friend, so. And so this is sort of going back in time, but the last thing is thinking about scale. Well, not the very last thing, but scale. This is a piece I made in Skowhegan and in the forest. Again, flipping nature and the landscape and thinking about the gallery wall instead of having an image of nature, actually being out in nature. So this is a wall I built in this tree in the back of Skowhegan in one of the forests. I wasn't even really thinking about the light and all the shadows. And then after that, I was in the show at Arboretum where the similar idea, where I built this very straight level wall with drywall with 2x4s, kind of around this tree. So there's no screws in the tree. The tree is not harmed in this process. It's just sort of resting. And this particular blue ash tree really like kind of envelops it and protects it. So that's the front view. And if you walk behind it, you can see all the weaving of 2x4s to create it. So this is, and later in this season. So right after that, I did this piece, which is why I kind of include it there. So thinking of architecture and when the photograph can become part of the architecture or when my sculptural move is like in response to the gallery space. After the residency at Bemis, the curator invited me to propose something for the gallery. So I proposed this piece called A Ghost of a Tree. And it's image I'd taken actually of just this ponderosa pine, so kind of a innocuous image, but then scaling the tree to be the same scale as its column, which is also a wood column. And depending on where you are in the gallery, whether you see it behind there or not. So that was kind of an exciting first to be able to do something at that scale. And then after that, this is the show at Art in General I was telling you about. I really wanted to do another version working off the columns in that space and do something that's sort of curved and that's double-sided. So this piece is called Moonwave, was called Moonwave. And I built this on site with Italian bending poplar. I built it kind of like a wall or a boat. And a lot of these pieces like this piece are destroyed at the end of the show. But they also have this sort of fleeting permanence in their nature. So that's the front and the back of the piece, double-sided. And again, kind of breaking through the wall, the architecture. This is a double-sided print. I really wanted to go through the wall into Kim's office. So this goes through the, oh shoot, I did that again, sorry. Okay, no. Okay. So I cut a slit in the wall and the piece is kind of shoved into the office of the gallery. And that's what you see from the office side, just like a nibbin of it. And then 2020, I finished this public art for public schools project. It took me a few years to do, which was so great because I could really form something on a specific section of the school. So this is again sort of folded moonrise that's on the lobby of PS 132 in Brooklyn. And then there's two other pieces on the other floors. But I don't know, I was kind of imagining, I feel like when I was a child and get like a book of faraway places, it was just very inspiring. And the simple cuts and folds of my work could translate into this piece where you see the wall behind it. And not super lastly, but so I was invited to do a piece at De Cordoba. And this, I really went big for the first one, but to make an outdoor sculpture that was incorporating my photographs, that was something I was interested in with the UV technology, that I could do that. So there are photographs printed onto Corten steel that are then welded together. And the back kind of continues to rest in patina from different sides, from different angles, through different seasons, sort of has different views. And this piece is now installed at my house. If you want to come visit me upstate, it's in the yard. And then for the show at Grimm, so I continue to make some of these large scale pieces. In this case, it can be disassembled. They're quite heavy. And this was a slice of Hawaii lava through Bryce Canyon. And this was for the show at Grimm. And the nice thing, so this piece then was able to travel and go outside. So you can see how it changes with the weather as the Corten steel rusts. And another piece for that I made, well, it was kind of partially made and COVID kind of stopped it. So I was happily able to finalize this piece. And this is a show in Riverside Park. So again, I don't know, I'm interested in sort of the different angles of how the sculpture responds to the outdoors, you know, whatever its environment is, how that changes, how the weather changes it. And a piece of RIT on their campus, which is also still there in Rochester. Back. Okay, now I just have a few more things, but I'm gonna now just do a little bit of chronology of more recent things, works. This was the show that Mark saw at Higher Pictures. I really want to do these pieces that could exist as sculptures or wall pieces. And I was also thinking the format of a book. So it's a single image. They're printed on either steel, copper, or brass. They're small. And they're hinged, so they could hang on the wall in all these different ways. I kind of love that idea of that one piece could kind of be dozens and dozens of ways of displaying it. It's just a few from this one piece. Copper. This was actually probably my biggest technical challenge to figure out how to make these hinges. And then this piece, probably my last, well, no, that's not true. But this was for a project at SUNY Purchase. I really wanted to take this center wall, kind of cantilever it out into space. Also that the light from above here is shining down through the piece. It's called Slit Slot Canyon. And actually a really cool thing for me about this piece is a dancer reached out, a choreographer reached out to me and proposed that his class work with it and did a performance for the very, like when the piece was destroyed, his class actually, that was a performance they did with the work. And that was just super cool to see. There's a small video on my Instagram. And another outdoor sculpture, this is in San Diego, the ICA. And then this is just a very recent project from last summer. Again, I'm still kind of really going. So one thing is that during 2020, my husband got a job in Hartford, Connecticut. So they have an amazing maker space. So I just took all these welding classes and metal classes and really wanted to be able to do them myself, these kind of works at the scale. So I invested in a metal brake and welding and also wall pieces. So this is kind of from a series from last year. There's copper. I don't know, it's kind of like a math problem, but I also love the way that burn, like to actually weld the photograph and have it burn. I think that's my favorite moment. Just kidding. I'll just, last but not least, this is very last one. For the show at the CMCA, I proposed this piece that responded to the different light temperature in the galleries. They built this wall for me because it's like the other gallery has these skylights and it's just pouring natural light in. So I installed this photograph that I punched holes through so that you kind of like have this light pouring through. And that's it. Thank you.